Hi, welcome to my journey. Today happened to be a little bit warmer than the last couple of days. We had a cold front, no doubt. And since it's a little bit warmer, we decided we'd get out. Hold on. Okay. So let me say this because it's on my mind. Back in the day when I was a sales manager at Alamo Rent-A-Car, I was making, about $21 an hour, okay? And this was 30 years ago. So I applied for a manager trainee position. The manager trainee position started you it starts at a range of $18 to $21 an hour. And I'm like, oh my God, is this is that's one of the reasons why I was, not wanting to become a part of management, because, management positions are not paying any different than what they used to pay 30 years ago, right? A lot of times, because managers are on salary, the hourly, with their overtime, they would get paid more than the managers, which was one of the reasons why a lot of the managers, was disgruntled and didn't really want to do the work and forced everybody to do the work, since, they were getting paid more than the managers. Because with overtime, they were getting paid more than the managers. Because the managers generally made like a couple of dollars more, a few dollars more an hour, than the hourly people. So think about that. If you get overtime, you catch up with the manager pretty darn quick. Okay? So yeah, that was one of the reasons why, I just sort of quit pursuing, management positions. One of the reasons why I quit pursuing sales positions was because, nepotism is rooted really strong in our culture, right? You could be an excellent salesperson. You could educate somebody. And the first thing they'll tell you is, oh, let me think about it, right? And what they're thinking about is, do they know somebody in their family or through their associates or through some other program that might offer referral fees, rather than, honor the fact that you were the one that stimulated the whole, whatever it was you were prompting them, or educating them to buy. Right? And I was like, oh, no. I'm not going to go around here educating these people just so, they could try to find somebody else that they like better than me, or a family member, or, turn around and try to see if, they can, be a representative and then, sell what I sell. And this is how competitive people are. Okay, this is how competitive they are. Now, understandably, we know 20 years ago everybody was searching for, referrals and, incentives, to buy certain products and services. Okay? And they were like, well, that's just a part of doing business. And I'm like, How is it just a part of doing business when, you purposely, being educated by one person and then turn around and decide, to use what you learned from that one person and capitalize off of it. And that was like one of the things that I had, noticed when it came to I'm not involved with these other channels like TikTok, X, or none of the. I'm really not. My participation on those other platforms is very, very limited, right? I'm mainly a YouTuber, but what I was seeing was that people were using YouTube, to solicit and fish for customers, right? If they were doing tarot, they were like, well, if you want to read, descriptions are down below, right? This way they're cutting out any share that YouTube could possibly get, even though the customers that they're getting is from YouTube. And I just thought that was kind of unethical, right? And, sometimes, they was, sending people to even their domain or, other platforms. And I was like, is this legal? Is this legal? And then, yeah, I don't know if it's legal, but it seems to me like, you don't care if you're, being monetized or not, if you're getting, people to pay for your services because you're advertising your services in the process of doing YouTube. Okay? But then, today, I was listening to this prepper, right? And, she was giving this, like apocalyptic type of, video, and how people are going to be out here struggling, where, the government's not going to provide anything except taxes for your property. No electricity, maybe some sewage. Yeah. No jobs, no food, none of that, right? Now, let's be honest. You cannot get mad at your government when you've been telling the government to back off. Back off, government. Back out of our business, government. Right? Y'all been saying that for the longest, right? And then when the government backs off, now you're crying. You're like, we want you to back off, but we still want you to provide us with free services. We don't want to pay taxes, but we want you to figure out a way to compel people to work, feed and shelter the public. Right? Because I have walked down that road mentally in my mind. Like, how can you imagine a world where nobody does any work? Nobody's doing any work. Right? Nobody. What will people do? And, it just seems to me that some people, they will just keep on, sucking and effing. It's like, what? How you gonna suck and eff and then bring children into this world and they can't eat? They don't have shelter, which is where we're at. because they've been doing a lot of sucking and effing, and not caring about, the consequences of not being able to take care of the children. And they thought it was all cool, to be able to do this and have a government, out of the kindness of their hearts, will give shelter to these single women and children who've been abandoned by these men. Right? And they did that. Why did they do that? Yeah, it was out of their kindness, but it was also a preventative measures so that these men were inclined to kill these women and children so that they wouldn't have to pay for them. Okay? Because men will do that. And I still can't imagine, that kind of world. Right? The boredom, the hostility, I just can't even imagine that, even if people didn't have to pay for nothing, if you didn't have to pay for nothing, you didn't have to impress nobody, to be with you or anything like that, right? And it just seems to me that, some way, somehow, people will still try to figure a way to perpetuate envy and jealousy on the planet. Right? And what made me think about this kind of situation was not only the apocalypse, movies and skits that are being, relayed to the public. Even myself, when it comes to, like living my everyday life, right? We're getting ready to go into fall. The last 4 years, I didn't really have to worry about, dressing too much because, my attire was basically sweatsuits, workout gear, because I was working at Amazon, right? And there was no dress code except, just be comfortable. Matter of fact, there was people coming to work in their pajamas, and I was like, that's too suggestive. Do not sit up here and tell people they can come to work in their pajamas and not think that they're not in some corner, trying to get it on. Because that's the first thing that some people think about when they wake up. Is satisfying an arousal. Anyway, which also made me think about why in the world would they ever, make women wear dresses? That's like easy access. Now, I know when I was in an Arab country, they used to have what looked like a sack that they would put on, their women. And it would be a sack. It had elastic on the top, and then it had, 2 slits on the side, but the bottom was closed in. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. At least, right? It makes a lot of sense because, you don't want easy access. And I know some people are like, well, yeah, they could pull your clothes down. Yeah, that's a lot easier slap. Okay? No, it's not. That was me being sarcastic again. So, it's a shame that we live in a rape culture. It's a shame that, they can't see themselves for who they really are. That they would rather project who they are onto other people, like, they're evil, right? One of the things that, had been talked about was how, we would have, people of different religions, will show up and, these religions, of course, are enforced by these men that participate in these religions, right? And a lot of them, will I wouldn't necessarily say safeguard their women, but that's what they would say is safeguarding, by basically imprisoning their women to stay on their compounds or in their homes. And then, they'll treat everybody else's woman, as if they're, low-life savages, with no rights, and, and they feel like, this justifies them being able to rape them or kill them, stuff like that, and it just blew my mind. This type of thinking, like, what the heck, and understandably, when you live in an isolated situation, you can pretty much be taught anything. But today we live in a society where we can, have access to all of this different information, right? All of this different knowledge, all of these different cultures, all of these different traditions, and even to the point where we can see, traditions, evolving through history. And yet, they're not utilizing this information and applying it into wisdom. They're not. And I've heard so many of them say, they want to go back to the way things was, and they don't even realize the way things was. It's just a gimme type of situation that these men are trying to, get away with until they can. And then they'll start another gimme campaign. But here's the thing, right? So yeah, she was saying, this prepper was saying that, a lot of people who went on YouTube, didn't realize that, they were getting money from advertisers. And now that advertisers, are not paying, that they're losing money because, they're not sponsoring the ads. Okay? So, yeah. I mean, it was definitely a good thing, right? For a minute. And, for some people, it can be sustainable, especially if, they're the type of person that's doing an educational type of video and people are interested in seeing their videos. Like Itchy Boots. Itchy Boots is not just some traveler out there. She's a geologist. She is out here, taking assessments based off of, her knowledge that she's able to perceive while she's doing this traveling. And she just reached 3 million people, 3 million subscribers. And she was celebrating that. And I was so happy for her because I love watching her. Because she gives us a little bit of history. She gives us some landscaping. She gives us some, some ecology, and I just love that. Also, she's also teaching us another lesson on how some of these countries, won't allow her as a woman, to travel through their country unescorted. Right? And it won't be everybody that's, vicious and mean like that, because there's a lot of men who don't feel like women should pay for anything, that the world should be free for women. They are the bringers of life. Therefore, they should not want for anything. Okay? And I agree with that. I agree that, women should not have to pay for anything because we're the bringers of life. That the world should be free. Whatever it is we see, and then we decide that's what we want, then we should be able to have it. As long as it's not in excess. But that's my opinion. And these men who are misogynist against women, they're definitely not going to agree with that at all. Let me go over here and take my little doggies for a little walk. So, and even when women feel lonely, women aren't out here trying to rape somebody. They know that the loneliness is about nurturing and caring for something alive besides themselves, whether it be a plant, a dog, a cat, a bird. They just have to figure it out. What species, what form of life will give them fulfillment. But anyway, happy belated Scorpio season. Damn, we're already halfway through Scorpio season. But we're down here at this part of the lake. I'm gonna take my little PDs out here so they can get some fresh air. So yeah, it is Scorpio season, and that does remind me that we're going through the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. People repeat history all the time. Sodom and Gomorrah is not going to affect everybody. And, you know, there's going to be collateral damages of even the people who are innocent from participating in the Sodom and Gomorrah rituals. And while I'm at it, I do want to give you some more little juicy tidbits when it comes to astrology, because I haven't given y'all any. But what I want to tell you is the single eagle signs of the zodiac, they're like the basic ingredients, right? You know how you get basic ingredients? Right? The sugar, the flour, you know, and then the, hey, come here. The sugar, the flour, and, you know, the eggs, the, you know, whatever, right? And the plural-minded eagles of the zodiac, they're like the cake, you know, after the ingredients have all been combined and they compose something, right? Which, you know, made me try to figure out, you know, why is there this issue, you know, with you know, the plural-minded not understanding the single-minded eagles. The eagles, the single-minded eagles, they do understand the plural-minded eagles. It's just that they don't get no fucks about that, right? That's like you want to tell the flower that they need to be mad that they're not a cake. And the flower is like, how in the hell am I going to be mad that I am not a cake? Think about that, okay?